The state says yes to casinos, but a community says no. So what's going on in Pope County? The state says yes to medical marijuana, but is the prescription any nearer being filled? The stalemate in the nation's capital. What effect is the border wall showdown having in Arkansas? But first, a new term for a now familiar governor and a new General Assembly with some new faces confronting predictable problems. Arkansas Week coming up.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our first edition of Arkansas Week in a new year. A River Valley controversy, casino gambling, some progress toward medical marijuana, an American standoff over a wall on the Mexican border, and what it could mean in Arkansas. But we start tonight with a legislative session about to convene, with the second gubernatorial administration about to begin. On the panel for this edition, Chris Hausnick of the political science staff at Arkansas Tech, Hal Bass, professor of political science at OBU, and Ernie Dumas, an independent journalist. And Ernie, we'll start with you because here we go again. We've got tax policy at the top of a session. Sessions are always about money, whether they're even or odd.
Well, it will be about money, and it's hard to predict these things, but at this point, it looks to me like that it's going to be, I think, a rather placid legislative session. As you say, that'll deal with money. That's the first object of the General Assembly is to pass a budget for the next year. It used to be for the next 2 years, but for the next year. And that means passing some 400 or 500 separate appropriation bills under the system we have in Arkansas. And one or two of those probably may create some issues. The Medicaid expansion and the appropriation for the Department of Human Services, particularly the Medicaid program. That's the one area where we the last few years has expected a big battle back since 2013, I guess. When we started dealing with that aspect of the Affordable Care Act. So, and that's all the speculation now is, will they be able to get the 3/4 votes to pass the Medicaid expansion? I think they will, and that you would think maybe they might try to deal with that fairly early in the session because we have some litigation, a federal lawsuit that could impinge on that. That decision about whether Arkansas's work requirement as a condition for people to get to be on Medicaid, whether that will, there's a lawsuit saying you can't do that, and the same court said Kentucky couldn't do it, and now they're going to have their say about whether Arkansas can do it, whether the Arkansas plan meets the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. So, but that may be March or April before that decision comes down, and the legislative session may be about over. So you'd expect maybe they might try to deal with that earlier in the session, get their 3/4 votes before they don't have to deal with that. So that's the big issue, is the Medicaid expansion. So, and again, I think you have it's a different ball game than back in the old days, Steve, when you and I used to cover the legislature, when it was a Democratic legislature, which is to say a no-party legislature. And they had their brawls, but now it's a Republican legislature, an overwhelming Republican legislature, a Republican governor, and they will all march in order, I think. They will cut the state income tax, the highest bracket, which is what the governor wants. I don't see any big brawl over that. They will pass the budget probably without any, they'll pass a big reorganization of state government for whatever good benefits that will accrue. But I think it's going to be a fairly passive legislative session, but I'll keep my fingers crossed about that.
Well, in terms of renewing the Affordable Care or the Medicaid expansions, there have been days, weeks even, of drama in preceding session. But Pat, continuing that is almost an essential. I mean, we're talking about a budget collapse and Revenue Stabilization Act without it.
Well, it is. I mean, they talk about they're trying to. One of the reasons that the legislature and the governor a couple of years ago, I guess now, imposed this work requirement was to reduce the number of people beneficiaries. Now they say that's not the purpose of it, but that's clearly the idea, is to get some of these people off the roads, to reduce both mainly the state expenditure of money. Now the state is putting up about 6% of the cost of that Medicaid expansion. So they're trying to reduce that cost, but in the last year and a half, they've probably knocked 50,000 people off the roads. And that has a financial impact. I mean, it maybe save you some money on the state share of the Medicaid, but it costs you money as well. You're losing all of that federal money. That would be tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that will be coming into the state for hospitals and doctors and nurses and all of that, plus the University of Arkansas medical system. So you lose all that money. Plus, I looked at the figures the other day, and as a result of that, state insurance premium tax revenues have fallen by $25 million. $25 million is not a small amount of money. So the budget is impacted. If you don't have the Medicaid expansion, it will be a huge blow to the state treasury and to the economy of the state of Arkansas. So it's a crucial issue.
Yeah. What we're seeing here really is a gap between politics and policy, because the politics don't allow for the kind of, shall we say, generous consideration that the policy of covering as many Arkansans as possible on the health care front demands here. To get the votes through the legislature right now, you've got to put these stringent requirements in that are certainly problematical in terms of federal law, but are also problematical in terms of the effect they're having on the population, with the people being pushed off the roads, as Ernie indicated here. And it seems to me the challenge that the incoming legislature and the governor face right now is the dilemma of balancing a posturing approach versus a governing approach. And the hope is that the governing approach will prevail.
Yeah, Chris?
I was just going to say, something I might look for, I don't have any indication it will happen, is one of the big stories when the problems of the work requirements came out was that it's an ancient system. You have to phone in 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. There's no online portals, et cetera, to report you're working. That's what really ran nationwide when Governor Hutchinson started reducing, like you said, tens of thousands of people coming off, putting in place the proper infrastructure while, sort of skips around the policy, but it may help remedy that problem where people can have at least the potential to more easily report their working. Might be something to look for in this session to try and remedy at least part of the issue. Maybe not the greater politics one, but at least part of the image issue that came up with cuts to healthcare funding like that.
Yeah, and the fiscals among providers too, as was explained to me by several of them, including a couple of hospital administrators. It does not take many cases of uncompensated care, depending on the gravity, the severity of the malady, to push a hospital a lot closer toward the red than it wishes to be. In fact, into the red in some cases. So maintaining, Ernie, the broadest possible enrollment is.
Well, it is. Arkansas is kind of similar to other southern states like Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi that didn't have broad coverage of before the Affordable Care Act passed. Not many people had insurance or were on Medicaid. As a result, Arkansas was the first state in this region that expanded Medicaid under the authority of the Affordable Care Act. And as a result of that, Arkansas is the only state in this region that has not lost any community hospitals in the past, what is it now, 4 or 5 years, I guess. Texas, a number of community hospitals have folded in Texas, and that's happening in Louisiana and Mississippi as well. Louisiana now has expanded Medicaid as well. So that's a big issue, and as you say, that's the big impact it has on community hospitals in the state, and the doctors and all the other employees, and the patients in those hospitals.
Well, in terms of the general revenue budget as well, or the tax program, the governor's tax program as well, we've still got an economy on fire. Inflation pretty much under control. The Fed looks like it's going to ease off for a while. So for the time being anyway, there's milk and honey and plenty of room, with natural growth, plenty of room for the administration to seek, as we all seem to agree, quite likely to get a reduction in the top brackets anyway of the state income tax. But how close to the margin are we if suddenly there's an aberration or there's a slowdown in the economy, a significant event?
Well, and that's coming. It's just a matter of time. We hope there's not a recession this year, and the economy is still perking along pretty well nationally and in Arkansas. But the time is coming when we'll have a downturn, and the state will be in trouble. We've been in trouble before, and what you always do when you get in trouble, you have to cut everybody's budget, the schools and the penitentiary and the colleges and health care and all the other agencies of government that are dependent upon general revenue. So that day is coming, and then we'll see. That's what happened in Kansas, cut taxes, and then they never really recovered there. They had a downturn and then just never recovered from it. So that's when we'll see the crisis occur, and we hope it's not in 2019 or 2020, but that day is coming, and that's when we'll pay the piper.
Crystal ball, Al, I'm sorry.
That's one of the selling points, though, for the governor's reorganization proposal, is that he's suggesting he can cut some of the administrative cost of governing through this reorganization. Whether that's the case remains to be seen. Right. But it does strike me he's done a very good, Governor Hutchinson has done a very good job of lining up outside support for this. Anytime you promote reorganization, you're disrupting existing patterns of interaction among the lobbyists, the legislators, the bureaucrats, and the like. And folks like stability. He's worked pretty closely, by all accounts, with the lobbyists in terms of making sure that this reorganization proposal has broad interest group support.
Well, I think it will have. Reorganization is always, it's actually pretty popular. Remember, Steve and I, and probably you too, remember when Dale Bumpers came in raw and unaccomplished in state government and politics, and inherited this plan that Winthrop Rockefeller paid for to have reorganized state government. He passed it handily. I don't think there were a handful of votes against it. And it was a very proud accomplishment. I think in the end, Dale Bumpers would say it didn't really amount to much except outside one big department. And I think that's the case with here. There's all this talk about it. You see editorials praising it because it's going to, as if it's going to eliminate some 40 state agencies or something, from 52 down to 42 down to 15 state departments. But it's not going to get rid of any state agencies, and it's not going to get rid of any state employees. In fact, it may add a few. You may have to create a new director with a pretty good salary. But the selling point is that it helps the governor to function. Rather than have 52 separate agencies reporting to him and him checking on them, you'll have 12, 15 department heads, and they'll be his intermediaries. But it's not going to save a lot of money. It may never save any money. It may cost some money. Who knows? Initially it's going to cost them. Everybody's going to have to change their stationery and their envelopes and so forth. But it may help the governor maintain some control of state government. But it's not going to be a big cost-saving thing, I don't think.
Crystal ball time before we move on. Highways. Every corner, every congressional, every county judge, every mayor wants a highway program. Every legislator wants a highway program. We just don't know how to get one so far.
Don't have to pay for one.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's, yeah.
Well, it's you and I, Steve, covered legislatures going back to the 1960s, and highways has always been a big issue.
Do you have to keep dating us the way you do?
About every 4 or 5 years has to be a highway program. because the highway costs keep going, highway construction and repairing costs keep going up, and taxes keep kind of going down, not totally, but relatively speaking, it goes down because cars get more efficient, you get more miles to the gallon, so it doesn't keep the revenues don't keep up with the costs. So we have to do it. So, but in the past, always, until very recent years, no governor who ever proposed a gasoline tax was defeated. They always passed those bills, and it took 3/4 vote in each house to pass them, and it was easy to get. 3/4 they were happy. In fact, you remember when Bill Clinton's last term, he wanted a 4-cent gasoline tax, and the legislature amended his bill to raise it to 5 cents, and he vetoed the bill, and the legislature overrode his veto, got more than 75% of the votes in both houses to override his veto. But now nobody.
I think there was a wink on that one too.
No, I think there was, although he expressed some regrets that he had to veto that bill. But no, he was very happy that they overrode his veto. But now I don't think conditions with the people out there have changed. People want highways. Every town they want their potholes fixed in their streets. They want the highway that goes through the county. They want it to be 4 lanes. And they're happy to pay that because the cost of gasoline keeps fluctuating up and down by big margins, but they don't want the legislators do not want to pass a vote on a tax increase, and they're not going to do it. So my hunch is that what they will do is come up with a plan and submit it to the voters at the next general election in 2020, and that will be the remedy.
All right.
That's my prediction anyway of what will happen.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Chris, what's going on in Pope County where you live? I mean, we got this casino thing. The state handily approves casinos. Pope County, which gets one of the 4, says no, but it may get it anyway. I mean,
That's what everybody's trying to figure out. It's progressed a lot as we expected it to. Casinos and convention centers and everything were theoretical exercises in 2018. Now that the vote has been passed, you are actually having firms show up and say, this is what we want to build. Gulfside Casino Partners was testifying at the Racing Commission yesterday, discussing the letters of support, when do they have to be submitted, things of that nature. It's still very much in flux, but it's starting to materialize, and you're getting an idea. From talking to people around town, I would suspect it's going to get done eventually, because they're talking about a substantial project. The initial estimates that Gulfside themselves put out, it's a $250 million casino right there on I-40. And I think it was just earlier this week, they talked about like $1 million for a year from the casino goes to Pope County schools. Like you were talking about having special interest groups lined up. The casino construction corporations really, they're going to make it hard for things like the quorum court, city councils, and mayors to vote no. A mayor's going to face re-election, unlike a Governor Hutchinson. When you say, oh, I could have had $1 million a year, I could have made 500 jobs in Pope County, and I said no. That's I think if the casino, Gulfside Casino would throw in something for addiction services and law enforcement, it'd be a slam dunk, and a lot of the problems and controversies would quickly end.
But the litigation won't quickly end, if I had to guess.
I think some of the litigation may have been rendered moot by the Racing Commission's verdict yesterday. The way I interpreted it, they had a hearing. The letters of support have to come when they're getting ready to break ground. So these apparently these letters that were written in the waning days of quorum court and
2 lame ducks on the way.
Those may be invalid. So it may be sometime later this year where mayors and quorum courts will have to start actually putting together the official letter to say, yes, we support this project.
Well, here's another clinical cultural issue, and that's medical marijuana. Hal, we seem to be inching slowly. Well, maybe we took a giant leap on Thursday. Anyway.
Well, let's call it with all deliberate speed. We had a constitutional amendment adopted, Amendment 98, back in 2016 by the voters, and we have step by step proceeded along the implementation trail. We've established what's called the Arkansas Medical Marijuana Commission to oversee licensing and regulation of both cultivation and distribution. We have seen the awarding of cultivation licenses back in the summer, I believe it was, and now just in the past week, we've seen a movement toward the authorization of permits here. You're going to have, I believe, 32 distributors distributed around the state into 8 zones here. And the commission has outsourced the evaluation of applications to a consulting group. They made their recommendations. The commission did embrace them. Now it's up to those who are on eligible here to decide which region or zone they want to operate within, because you can only be within one, and then to pay a $15,000 licensing fee and post a $100,000 bond. And at that point, when all that gets done, presumably, since medical marijuana cards have been already issued, people can start getting access to medical marijuana in the state.
Of late, a lot of comparisons to this process in Arkansas to the one in Oklahoma, where apparently they really ripped it out.
And of course, that raises the question, while we're in limbo here in Arkansas, can those who hold a medical marijuana card go into Oklahoma and then bring back medical marijuana? And the governor suggested he'd rather they not.
Takes a dim view of that. Well, let's move on to something else, and that's the showdown. I hesitate to call it a Mexican standoff in Washington. It really isn't. Well, it is, but what's the way forward, Al? When are we going to start? We're already, I guess, feeling it in Arkansas to some extent.
Sure we are,
We're
and
about
again,
to feel it more.
The focus of what is now a 21-day shutdown, and that will be a record as of tomorrow, the longest shutdown ever. The origins go back, of course, to the inability of Congress to pass the budget bills that were supposed to be in place as of the beginning of the fiscal year, October 1st. What Congress has done historically when it can't do this is kick the can down the road with a continuing resolution. This particular plan didn't work this time because President Trump indicated his unwillingness to sign on to a continuing resolution. Right now, the focus has been on the developments in D.C. among the principals, the House and Senate leaders and President Trump. And in that sense, compromise has proved to be very difficult in this era of polarization and negative partisanships. The incentives appear largely lacking, but as time passes, and time has passed, increasing attention is going to be devoted to the effects of the shutdown on we the people. And that's when I think the pressure starts building for resolution.
Yeah, you can see the ripples now, Chris.
I think it's two things kind of kept it, that it's a partial shutdown, took a little bit of the emphasis away, but also that the holiday season, most departments are shut down, but now that you're into January, everybody's expecting the government in full swing, you're going to see more of this. Like one of the departments, most it is the Department of Agriculture, and Arkansas's got huge amounts of farming. If you need loans that come through the Department of Agriculture, they're not even accepting applications on their website until the shutdown ends. The Forest Service, logging applications, things of that nature, that drives some of the economy of Arkansas are just in limbo. And as Hal said, 21 days right now, it's not a big deal, but you could see if this shutdown drags into February, into March, when there's no Department of Agriculture farm reports that help shape markets, this could start to really impact Arkansas economically and through the agriculture industry.
You can sort of see it snowball, Ernie, it approaches the exponential.
Well, I think they're right that because of the Christmas season, because it's not all of the federal government's shut down, but there are significant aspects of it, particularly agriculture and forestry in Arkansas, and maybe the Internal Revenue Service, and people people who file their income tax returns early, expecting an early refund and can't get it, they'll be upset. Then you have the impact of the direct impact of the federal employees. I don't know how many federal employees that are affected by the shutdown are in Arkansas, but they're all feeling it already. They're not going to have a little trouble paying their mortgage payments and their rent and so forth and their groceries. But I think that we're getting close to the end of this thing. My hunch is that maybe the president will declare his emergency, a national emergency, and say he's going to build it with military money, and maybe then they'll let them pass the resolution and pass the budget and going about our business. And then we'll have a big lawsuit, and the fight will continue, but maybe we'll reopen the government.
Send it to the courts. Got to end it there, guys, because we're out of time. Thanks to all of you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. Have a great new year, and we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.